This is the fourth set of guidelines for composition, and it's on page 3 of your free textbook handout. So I've talked about the importance of all artists using elements of art and principles of design, and this set is going to demonstrate the element of form and the principle of rhythm. So this is a really famous Edward Weston photograph. It's rather abstract. On when we talked originally about how a photograph can be poetry, we look at it and we see something that you see at the grocery store or the produce stand, but at the same time you also see other suggestions of forms, torsos and things like that. So it's I think if you're a collector, this is in the $16,000 to $20,000 range for an original print. He made several original prints, so if you save your money, you can have an original. Okay, but getting around to our guideline, this one is graded shadows build mass and volume. So we try and determine that shading can be of one of two varieties. A cast shadow is usually a shadow that falls on a tabletop or it falls on a floor or on the sidewalk, and if it's from the sun, a cast shadow is just one shade of black or one shade of dark gray. And in a sense, it's almost like cutting it out of a piece of gray or black paper and laying it down on the sidewalk. A graded shadow, on the other hand, starts off here in a highlight, very light, and then as it moves it goes towards darker, lighter, a little darker, there's a highlight right there, and then it moves darker and around like this. So the number of shades of gray along this line are several. It's not just a shade, it is a gradation. If you want to make something look three-dimensional, like a person could reach in and pick out this pepper from this print because it almost looks that real, then you're going to use graded shadows. We also call this wraparound lighting. Weston was famous for using the simplest equipment. For lights, he used window light and he used reflecting boards and no electrical lights at all, no flash at all. This is another example of graded shadows building mass and volume. This is kind of like a studio shot. And for those of you that try and shoot any sort of a highly reflective surface, you're going to run into all kinds of challenges. So I'll just give you a hint that if you were working in a studio, you would build a tent, something like a dunce cap. Okay, you'd get a great big piece of white paper and you'd make a cone, and that cone would go around the trumpet. Now it'd be a lot bigger than that, but that's kind of the idea. And then Now look at this little dark area right here. Do you see that little dark area right there? That is probably a cut or a break in the paper cone, and that's where the photographer inserts the camera lens uh, and takes the picture. How do you light this? You don't put any lights inside at all. All of the lights are on the outside of the object, of the tent, and they are illuminating the translucent white paper. Now they have tabletop diffuser boxes, and if you were going to be on eBay and selling stuff, you might buy a diffuser box instead of having to build a tent out of paper. But that's the way they do that. If you have a super reflective thing like a bottle of wine, if you have something like silverware, you don't want to get reflections of yourself in it, so you build a tent around it. Now these are giving us 3 dimensions, and 3 dimensions we refer to those as form, F-O-R-M. So a triangle is a shape that's 2-dimensional. A pyramid is a form. It's built up of triangles, but when you put light and shadow on it, it becomes form. About the 1920s and the 1930s, the West Coast, the F-64 school decided that they were going to try and depict the essential forms of everything. They may have fallen underneath the spell of a modern artist by the name of Cézanne, who was trying to reduce everything into simpler geometric solid geometries. Okay, so now we can have 3-dimensional geometric forms implying logic. This was a drawn up plan on a piece of paper, and it was 2-dimensional, and it was full of logic because they used 2 squares and triangles, and they relied heavily on geometry. But when they went to build it, it left the flat surface and it became 3-dimensional. And the lighting here, this is the key, the lighting. We have highlights over here on this side. We have shadows over here on this side. Without light and shadow, we would not have form. So when you are photographing in the middle of the day, when the sun is way up at the zenith, at the top of the sky, there's very little form. Everything appears to be kind of flat. And that's why photographers favor mid-morning, mid-afternoon, or if they live in Arizona where it is 115 degrees, they get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and they go around and they shoot pictures because they have beautiful long shadows and they don't die from exposure. Don't forget your water when you go out to take pictures. So now we've shifted from a geometric form to a free form. And nature is really good at constructing sculptures that they don't look like they came off of a drawing board. They look like they were more natural. They have all sorts of, there was a movement in the late 1800s which was called the Art Nouveau movement. And in Art Nouveau, they studied plant forms and they picked up on all of these beautiful curved things. So when you see a 3D object, that is something organic, and you use wraparound lighting on it, soft lighting, diffuse lighting, you can kind of build in a 3D, okay, not two-dimensional. I know the photograph is flat, but it looks three-dimensional. Let's see, that's another example of the 3D freeform suggesting freedom. Now, class, everybody raise your hand if you like music. Oh, I see. Everybody likes music. That's good. Okay. Has anybody ever listened to music and you had to move to the music? I mean, you either had to tap your toe or you had to rock back and forth. What element of music were you responding to? It's rhythm. And human beings, and I'm pretty sure animals, and I know that even they've studied plants. I think all living things love to hear rhythm. Now we can transfer rhythm into photography, and we can look at repeating elements that go over and over and over. So whoever planted these trees, they did a remarkably good job spacing everything, and then in perspective we have a repetition over and over and over. So repeating lines create visual rhythm, and just like you like music and you like to listen to rhythm, you're going to see, oh my goodness, look, now we have the shadows, and all of the shadows are repeating themselves. Down, down. This is converging lines. These are going to help us to give the feeling of depth and space in the picture. And oh my goodness, look up here at the sky. We have kind of like repeating rolls of clouds that are just kind of, finding their way along. So this photograph is filled with repeating lines. Some of you may be asking yourself, why are the values so strange? And this is an example of what's called infrared photography. Your camera sensor picks up what we call the visible light spectrum. But on either end of the visible light spectrum, we have electromagnetic energies. We have ultraviolet and we have infrared. And during the development of the camera, at times, especially maybe the military, they wanted to take pictures of things in the dark, but they wanted to be able to see what those things were. So they developed a film that was sensitive to heat, the differential of heat, and it exposed the emulsion, and then they would make the print. So the trees were cool and they were rather light, and the road was hot and that is rather dark. So if you like this look, you can maybe experiment. I haven't seen this in Snapseed yet, but if you have Lightroom or if you have Adobe Photoshop, there are tutorials online that teach you how to create a faux, not the real thing, a faux infrared. one of our students is curious enough to say, maybe I'm going to convert a camera into an infrared camera, and that would be very cool, but you'd really have to fall in love with it, because it would not be a very inexpensive conversion. If you've been hanging around the fire sciences, you know that there are thermal imaging cameras. If you've been working in sustainability, the thermal image camera is used to survey houses to find heat and cool. So photography just goes all over the place, but we're in the art photography area. Hope this helps you.